Obviously, what's one way? Tell it. Illustrate it. Any of you familiar or involved with or having done any mind mapping at a meeting where people are literally drawing pictures of what is happening? In no way here does it say the kid has to write it. It doesn't say that they have to tell it. It doesn't say they can't illustrate it. So the second principle is, how do we get kids who don't have those other skills to be able to participate? There's also something called speech to text, which is in the same software as text to speech. A kid can say it and it prints it out instantly. So I'm going to go back to something John said before that we have to remember and break it down a little more. A kid who cannot read cannot spell. Spelling and reading are the reverse neurological processes. They may be able to spell because they're really good memorizers, so they can spell the words. Anytime a kid spells words higher than their reading level, the next day, take their spelling list and ask them to read the words they spelled correctly yesterday, and they can't do it. They just simply memorized the configuration of the letter sequence. And if you can't spell, you can't write. So a single disability in decoding is going to impact not only your ability to access text, but your ability to write. It is a watershed issue. So if a kid can't read, don't ask the kid to write. If you want to see if the kid can articulate, I mean, you don't just like put a pencil, when you write, you don't put your pen on a piece of paper, close your eyes, and the pen just takes off and just starts putting stuff down. You have private speech, and you convert that private speech into a motor activity that puts graphemes that represent what's in your head. So because you can't have somebody else go in your head, you produce something that was in your head to communicate to somebody else what was in your head. All we care about is what's in your head. So a kid can use speech to text to recount a story. That's the second principle. The third principle is multiple ways of engagement. But my view of that has always been, if you have multiple ways of presentation, that's going to engage a kid. If you have multiple ways that the kid can communicate it, that's going to engage the kid. Kids are only disengaged when they can't do it. So the third principle kind of falls out if the first two are honored. So here's a takeaway for you from today. When you are working with kids who have serious decoding issues, will it be helpful for you to use the first and second principles of Universal Design for Learning when working with general education teachers about multiple ways of representation and multiple ways of performance? That doesn't solve, as John indicated before, that doesn't solve the kid's ability to decode, but it enables a kid who can't decode to demonstrate the standard. And that's a separate issue. So we don't have to lower a standard because a kid is not reading at grade level. We keep the standard, we eliminate the barrier of reading because the standard didn't even address how the kid accessed the information. We just assumed it did. So that's a big takeaway from today as we develop interventions. So here's why I like it. If I were in John's position as the building principal, I would reflect at this problem-solving meeting. So it sounds like we found a way to ensure that Kristen can access the content of the reading so that we can assess the degree to which she deals with the standard. Now, what are we doing about the decoding thing? You cannot mix them, because thinking and decoding are not in the same fruit basket. And so a building principal, a curriculum leader, provides leadership to ensure that both are addressed, but one is not a barrier to the other. Is that making sense? Okay. Now, the minute you start behaving like that in your school, people are going to go, what? It's going to represent a shift in how we think and the way we do work. So this kind of example and this discussion might be helpful as we transition to this kind of way of work. So let me give you one other thing. And now I'm gonna dip in and out of special ed as we go throughout the day, because special ed is always the elephant on the table. Right? So let's look at recount. Let's assume that you want a kid to be able to recount it in a traditional, access it in a traditional way. So what access skill would be necessary, and don't overthink this, what access skill would be necessary for a kid to be able to get the text in a traditional way? What is it? It's reading it, right? So reading becomes an access skill to recounting. What is an access skill for determine? Be able to isolate, identify. Those are access skills. And I know this is going to push your envelope a little bit, and I'll put it in context. That's how we align IEPs with state standards. The IEPs focus on the access skills necessary to address the standard. So an access skill, if a kid can't determine what are the access skills that kid needs to be able to do that, and that goes on the IEP, instead of Ames, Webb, Dibbles, whatever it is that came off of a test. Because that kid may actually have deficits in an area that have nothing to do with the standards being taught this year. And if we focus on that, then we never give the kid the access skills necessary to address the standards. So I'll summarize it. For special ed kids, we have the standard. We break it down into know, understand, and do. We ask what access skills are necessary to do that. Which ones does the kid not have? Those go on the IEP. And that's how the IEP has changed every year. It's the access skills to the standard that drive special ed instruction. And they most always do overlap with some of the others. But it's important to say to a teacher, Anne, right? Okay. It's important for me to say to Anne, look, Anne, you know Lisa, that Lisa sucks at reading. Okay? She's reading, she's still sounding out individual sounds, she has no blending and certainly no automaticity, and those are the issues that have got her fluency rate. So she's reading 25 words correct per minute, she understands what she's reading, but she's never going to get through any of the text. Okay. So we are going to do these different representation, different performance, so that you'll know if she's accessing the standard while we're trying to fix the other thing. We're still going to work on that, but we're working on it to increase our access to the text. So now you understand how the IEP is related to the work you're doing in the general ed classroom, and you're all over it. As opposed to saying, what's Lisa's special ed teacher working on? I don't know, it's on our IEP, and that's somewhere in her file, I guess. And I'm like, oh my God, they don't know what each other's doing. So how can this kid be getting any kind of help when two people are working hard, when the kid has to demonstrate the same goal regardless of what they're doing? So does that make any sense? Yeah. So just think about that. I'm not going to do it anymore for today, but just think about that as a takeaway. That's what standards-based instruction is. It is the cut for the problem solving, and it is how we identify access skills to drive an IEP. So I want to just point out something here to you, because I'm a huge proponent that kindergarten has to be our most academically strong classroom. So here's the kindergarten standard. With prompting and support, that's important. But here's the bigger issue. We tell familiar stories. We can't assume what's familiar. We can't assume all fourth grade kids read Super Fudge, Judy Blume, fourth grade nothing. That may be familiar to some kids, but not others. We have to be really careful that the stories that we're assessing kids on for this standard are familiar to them. The cultural connection and competency here is huge. And you may test that out with different stories of different kids. Bring your favorite book, the one you like the most, and you assess that standard with that book. because it is familiar stories. And it's with prompting and support. So you can retell it, including key details. Now let's fast forward to 12th grade. Determine 2 or more central ideas, that's kind of key details, and summarize it. That's retell it. The 2 primary focus areas for kindergarten comprehension are 2 primary focus areas for 12th grade comprehension. So if we don't think that kindergarten teachers set the foundation for literacy across anchor standards, we're crazy. What kindergarten teachers teach matters, because it is the foundation upon which, and if you go back and look at the anchor standards, you will see that it's central message, central message, central message. Now we add lesson or moral. But look in the 3rd grade, key details. Key details is in kindergarten. If kindergarten teachers don't teach that, key details, etc., now they're behind going into the 1st grade equivalent of the standard. And 1st grade teachers have to teach something kindergarten teachers should have sent those kids knowing how to do. That's why the anchor standards are important. They provide continuity across grade levels. And that's why kindergarten teachers need to feel like they're an important part of a literacy launch for all kids. So those are the 2 big things that kindergarten teachers need to have kids coming out of kindergarten with. They can retell stories that they hear, they can identify key details in the story. If they can't do that, then the 1st grade teacher is going to have a really hard time moving that key detail to a central message, because the central message is from the key details. So one of the ways that literacy teachers, special ed teachers, can identify where a kid is to look at the standard for that particular literacy skill across K-12 and say, here's where my kid is. Now I had a question yesterday, well, what if there's a 5th grade, let me see here, Okay, so the movement from, I may have left out a couple of grades, I did, I'm just using examples here. I jumped from that to 9th grade. But what is highlighted here is how the rigor is increased across grade levels, right? So I had a teacher ask me yesterday, what happens if you have a kid in 6th grade, but is really in the 3rd grade standard? I said, don't make that judgment. Because in 6th grade, we add rigor with another component. It is quite possible that a kid may not be at the 6th grade standard, but can do what that additional rigor wants them to do, because that's a skill the kid has, even though overall they may be at a lower level. So what we want to look at is what is it that each level adds? And maybe the kid can do it. Don't assume that they're absolutely linear, because kids who struggle have skills scattered all over the place. So look at your standard and see if the kid can do part of it. I don't want to get into that anymore because it's going to get boring for you. But that's the beauty of standards. And standards should address everything that we do. And the academic behaviors that go along with that, we've already talked about that. And we just went through this, we'll actually come back to it. Okay. Are we okay with standards doing this stuff for now? How many of you, that discussion was something you already knew, or how many of it was you already knew all that? How many of you took away something that might be helpful from that discussion? Thank you. So when we do our trainings, we ask everybody to write down 3 things. What was affirmed? What do you want to do new leaving this training? And here's the 3rd question. What are you willing to give up for what you do new? Because education is a culture of fact. We add, we add, we add, we add. And we're like hoarders. We never give up anything. So if we're going to add something new, what are we going to give up? Okay, so just food for thought. All right, the second big idea that's driving everything for the rest of the day. Academic engaged time. It is the best predictor of student growth that we have, bar none. If you want evidence, just Google academic research for academic engaged time and you'll get a litany of studies. And it's common sense. The more time you spend exposed to quality instruction, the better you're going to be. And the more you practice, the better you're going to be. How many of you know somebody called Anita Archer? The earth mother of explicit instruction, one of my best friends. And Anita, you know what she calls the difference between drill and kill, and drill and what? I'll do an Anita thing here. Say it together, drill and skill. Drill and skill. Am I acting like Anita?
Yes.
That's how she presents. Because there is a difference. We have to practice stuff a lot for it to get stronger. That's how the brain works. But you don't have to kill people by doing it. You can present it in a way that's interesting, fun, etc. I'm taking up golf, kind of kicking and screaming a little bit, after having not played for 47 years. And I'm awful at it. I don't know how I ever thought I ever played it. So I'm in a dilemma right now. As much as I like the idea of golf, unless I start practicing, I'm not going to get any better. And if I want to be at a certain point, at a certain time, I got to practice. My practice schedule has got to get there. Well, I don't have time for that right now. And as much as I'd like to do it, so I'm not playing golf right now. Because I don't want to be expected to go out there and be able to demonstrate something that I haven't had the opportunity, the academic engaged time to strengthen. So now how often do we put kids in places where they haven't had the opportunity to strengthen it and we expect them to do it, right? So academic engaged time predicts student growth better than IQ, achievement, socioeconomic status, race or ethnicity, ability, disability, regardless of where you are. The more you're exposed to quality instruction, the faster you will grow. Now, what does that mean for us in RTI and MTSS? It means that the currency of interventions is time first. So I'm going to give you the Dr. Seuss approach to this. So before I do that, the tiers are differentiated, as we'll see. First, by time. Tier 2 has to be more than Tier 1. It can't supplant it. Doesn't work. I'll show you why. Time. Tier 3 is more time than Tier 2. We'll play that out with the tiers. So here's the Dr. Seuss approach to problem solving. We go 4 steps. Time. How much time do we need for the instruction intervention? What are we going to do with the time we have? Who knows how to do the what? And where is the who knows how to do the what, who has the time, going to do it? So let's do special ed. We do the where first, your SLD. So Ann is the SLD teacher. So the where determines the who. Now, what if the who doesn't know how to do the what that the kid needs? Or what if the who knows how to do the what, doesn't have the time, so that the what matters and moves the kid? What if we develop an intervention and we don't have the time to do it? We just developed an intervention that needed a certain amount of time that we decided we don't have, so we're going to cram it into the time we have, but it's not going to work because that intervention, the what, needs the time that you don't have. Are you getting a Dr. Seussy feel to this? So all decisions should be made around time, what, who, and where. And if you're interested in history, in 1891 and 1896, a committee of 15 and a committee of 10 got together to determine the curriculum for American schools. And it was based upon a false concept of the brain, that the brain was divided up into faculties, and this is psychologists doing this one. Faculties for English, reading, music, math, all of this kind of stuff. And they decided arbitrarily how much time would be allocated to each faculty. It was 50 minutes. That time became known as the Carnegie Unit, and we use it today. And it was based upon bogus research, a total misunderstanding of how the brain works, and we still allocate time for instruction on a bogus model. So it doesn't matter how much time is allocated. If you want kids to grow faster, the first thing you have to do is allocate more time. Who's here from middle high school? What determines in your school how much time kids get for each subject area? What is it known as? The master schedule. Absolutely. So schedules have to be modified in an MTSS model because it's all about time. And I'll give you a couple of resources this afternoon. There's a couple of great books out around how to get more time at elementary, middle, and high school. So, and I don't know if they did this in Lee County. Matter of fact, I think the schedule I have may be from Lee County. It's a 4th grade schedule in which there were tons of kids who needed more time with reading. They ditched social studies, pulled social studies into the reading block, and got an extra 60 minutes a day to provide supportive instruction for kids by just pulling social studies into the literacy block. Back in the day, we used to have something called thematic instruction, where we integrated math, science, and reading, and we did a unit on dinosaurs. And we read about dinosaurs, measured dinosaurs, understood how dinosaurs ate and pooped and whatever dinosaurs did for that part of it. And we have an entire block of time. So here's something else I want you to look at, and I'll make John feel guilty here maybe. The average amount of time it takes kids to re-engage instruction at the elementary level from when they disengaged it is 5 to 8 minutes. That's getting back in it at the level they were in it before you transitioned. Count the number of transitions in your daily schedule, multiply it by 8, and that's the number of academic engaged minutes a day you are throwing away. The average elementary school has 10 transitions a day. Multiply that by 8, and you've lost 80 minutes of instruction because your schedule has kids transitioning 10 times. You want more? Don't say you don't have time. Alter your schedule to reduce transitions at the elementary level. You'll get more time. So, and that is by making things seamless for kids. Okay, we're done doing reading, now we're going to do math, put everything away. So now the kids are not only doing physical transition, they're transitioning from reading to math. There are ways to make that transition smooth. You start off math with a reading component of math. You continue the reading into the math, and then you move away from the reading and focus more on the math. But it's just a transition. We just finished reading this. We're going to read our math books next. Go ahead and pull them out. Turn to page 12. And in the standard, you're supposed to have reading across the curriculum anyway. But we don't have to do the stop and lose 8 minutes of time 10 times a day. So academic engaged time. From the behavior side, and you'll see shortly, we convert all office discipline referrals to lost minutes of instruction. We have the average amount of time the kids are in the office if they're referred there. We take all of that, multiply it by those minutes, and we have thousands of minutes a year of kids who lost instruction because of behavioral procedures. And often those kids are struggling. I'll show you that later. So that's academic engaged time. What about growth? I had a conversation with John before about growth. So here's some things I want you to look at. The slope of the line, right? You with me? Is the measure of instructional effectiveness. The steeper the slope, the more effective. The faster you're growing. Everybody got that? Okay, look at this. These data are for a kid who is in the 5th grade or 3rd grade, I can't remember. Her name is Mackenzie. She's in a school with multiple 3rd grades. Oops. Her school is in the green. Her classroom, her 3rd grade, is in the red. Are you with me? Okay. Look at only the first 2 data points. Point 1, point 2, point 1, point 2. With the slope of the line, who is responding, for whom is the instruction most effective? Mackenzie, her class, or her grade level in her school? Mackenzie. Who's the farthest behind? Mackenzie. Who's growing the fastest? McKinsey. In an MTSS model, we cannot confuse behindedness with rate of growth. You're always behind until you catch up. So if we had extrapolated this, by the end of the year, she would be pretty much where the rest of the group is. She's not now, but why would you mess with a car that's going fast enough to catch up just because you're behind? You can make cars go faster. Most of them. I got a rental car, a PT Cruiser, and I found that above 75 miles an hour, there was just more noise, no speed. But that's rare. Now answer this question. Let's suppose you're just collecting data on McKinsey. So ignore the top two graphs. Look at data points 2 and 3. Did her rate increase, stay the same, or decrease? Decreased. Would you be worried about her if you were progress monitoring her and all of a sudden she started falling off? Absolutely. Now look at the top 2 lines. Why do you think McKinsey has fallen off? Because of the problem with McKinsey? The entire grade level fell off, and her class worse than any of them. So now look at McKinsey's slope of the line between data points 2 and 3. Is it equal to or better than her class rate of growth? Yeah. So would you alter instruction for a kid who fell off if you had the data knowing the entire class fell off? No. So that means in an MTSS model, you always have to take data on the contents and the peers that they're working with in addition to the kid. Now this is discovery math. All of these assessments are embedded into the curriculum. So it's automatically done. We would never change her instruction. We got to figure out what's going on with the class and the grade level. Would not touch her because she's doing really well. Now let's look at the behavior because we also took her behavior.
Excuse me, can I just ask you a question on that?
Why not?
I just want to ask you a question.
Sure.
In saying that, I'm sensing that then there's a discrepancy between getting her to advance incrementally in order to catch her up to grade level and saying that we're not going to change her instruction.
Right. So the issue is here is that until the class as a whole fell off, she was going much faster. So it was working.
Correct.
What we were doing with her.
Correct.
And all of a sudden stopped working for everybody. So that problem has to be solved in order to get us back to where she was really growing. Because she got pulled down by whatever was happening in the class.
Okay.
So what we're showing here is that her rate of progress is as tied to the class performance, right?
Right. I guess I was assuming she was getting some kind of intervention.
Well,
She's that far below, and I'm assuming she's...
Well, yeah, in her case it may be that she is. So let's assume she is. It's a great question. What's your first name?
Barb.
Barb. So Barb, it's a great question. And I'm going to try to keep this simple.
Okay.
We know that interventions and the performance of special ed kids is most related to the performance of the general education class they're in. Because they get a small amount of time with the interventions. And that class has to then give her the opportunity to strengthen what the interventions began. So whatever's going on in the class, even if she continued to get the interventions, something about the class is pulling her down.
Right.
So we have to problem solve that before we run and change interventions.
Okay.
Just to say what it is, otherwise what we're doing is doing good stuff here and this is what's happening. And we have no control over that, but because we see both all the classes, but in particular her classroom, dropped.
And I agree.
Yeah, so we've got to figure that out.
I just wonder that if we start moving and shifting our attention then away from her, I don't know how she, I don't know how...
Oh no, we wouldn't switch it away. We would keep doing what we're doing. We're keep doing what we're doing. But we have to figure out what it is about the class that has slowed everybody down. Because this affected not just her, it affected everybody. So now let's look at this behavior one. This is on-task attention. Mackenzie's on the bottom. Who is growing the fastest in on-task? Mackenzie or her class? Look at this little line. McKinsey. Let's suppose we're just psychologists in here. We're just taking data on McKinsey. Between data points 2 and 3, are we very happy with what we're doing? No. Bonk. But if we didn't take data on the peers at the same time we took data on McKinsey, what would we not know? Look at the class. This isn't McKinsey's problem. The entire class dropped in their on-task attention. Something in that classroom is affecting everybody. And when we work with individual kids, we have to separate out what's affecting everybody from what's affecting this kid. Otherwise, we miss the mark on our instruction. Does that make sense? Okay. We good?
What were you using to collect that data?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What were you using to collect that data?
What we're using to collect the behavioral data?
Yeah.
So there are observation systems. I'll give an example and then I'll give you the name. What's your first name? Janelle. So Janelle, let's suppose you're the kid I'm doing an observation. We're going to talk about this more when we get into process. And you're a girl. And these are all girls at this table. So I'm going to observe you for 10 seconds with your on-task, off-task. And then I'm going to observe Jen. Another one. Awesome. And then I'm going to observe Jen. Then I'm going to come back and observe you. Then I'm going to observe Erica. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to observe you. So I'm taking peer data at the same time I'm taking your data. But I'm going to use an interactive observation system. So I'm also going to code simultaneously what the peer group is doing with you and what the teacher is doing with you and the peer group. So if the teacher walks up to you and says, Janelle, I'm not coming back again to get you on task. Jen, you're doing an awesome job. Wonderful. And Erica, you and Jen must really be cut from the same cloth. You guys are doing so. Janelle, what did I say? Okay. So the teacher's interaction with the peers is much more positive than with you. So this may be a very positive teacher, but not with you. So the climate in that classroom for you is very different than it is for Jennifer and Erica. So we can do all of that simultaneously. So if you have a hypothesis, or I have a hypothesis, that you are not staying on task because you are not getting reinforced when you are, and that your peers are reinforcing you for off task, I would know by looking at the teacher interaction with you, the peer interaction with you, whether that hypothesis was true or not. If it was demonstrated by the observation that the teacher is not providing reinforcement when you're on task, and the peer group is providing reinforcement to you when you're off task, what's the intervention? What are we going to talk to the teacher about? We're going to put duct tape and Velcro on the peer group. We're going to have a peer intervention and a teacher intervention, because the data showed us why you're off task. And can all be done on one form if you're doing interactive observations. That's integrating academics and behavior. Now here's another issue, and I'm using this opportunity so we don't have to talk about it later. When we do observations, let's say you're doing seat work. Doesn't matter what you're doing, let's just say seat work. And you're writing stuff. And I'm observing you. And you're off task. And you're 40% off task and 60% on task. And I'll say you're off task way too much. For what? Because when you do a behavioral observation, you must look at the academic product to see the relationship between the behavior and the product. So I work with kids all the time who are on task 35 and 40% of the time, finish all their work with 100% accuracy. I work with other kids who are on task 95% of the time, don't finish any of their work and get nothing right. So if you're doing integrating academics and behavior, for every observation, you must collect the academic product to see what the relationship was between the on-taskness and the product. And you don't have to spend any more time, Janelle, doing that than you did just doing a straight up on-task, off-task observation. Because you just collect more data, and then you ask to see the product at the end. Make sense? Okay, so we skipped about 6 slides. So, we're getting the relationship between academics and behavior, right? So I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff. I will show you this. Teacher presents a kid with grade level task. The student engages in a problem behavior. The teacher then either removes the task or removes the student. Student escapes the task. Student's academic skills tank. Teacher gives the kids a task. So what is it? Is it the task or is it the behavior? Who cares? You deal with both of them simultaneously. Yes.
Okay, but with that example you just gave us, the kid that was on task 45% of the time
Yes.
but produced a lot, the
Yes.
next kid doesn't really have a problem, does he?
Oh, the question is the kid who produced, did everything perfectly with 45% on
Yeah.
task.
I mean,
The kid only has, no, the kid never has a problem.
Well,
I mean, in terms of,
he got it.
he got it. Now, if he's doing it that fast,
Oh,
then maybe we need to
Okay.
amp it up. But most likely the kid violated the TII, the Teacher Irritability Index. So that kid is up messing. And that's really why the teacher wants the kid. So in that case, we would have to deal with that. And so we work with the peer group to stop reinforcing the kid. We'd use a group independent procedure. And it's kind of good behavior game, that kind of stuff. And we can settle that stuff out with something like the good behavior game. But no, it's not a problem for the kid. It's a problem for the adults typically. And the other kids, if the kid's bothering people. Or is the kids the source of the entertainment for the other kids? If other kids are reinforcing a kid for being inappropriate, that kid's the source of the entertainment. Because the kids are reinforcing the kid to get entertained more. But yes, just from a kid perspective,
He got it.
you got it. So now pedagogically, what do we do about that? That's a bigger issue. If we're allocating 20 minutes for a task and the kid is on task 60%, that means 12 minutes, the kid's engaged, 8 minutes, the kid's not. That's a huge amount of lost opportunity for a kid, even if the kid got the task right. But all that comes from one observation. Good question. Okay, so how do we integrate all of this? We have skill integration, academic skills, academic behaviors. We have data integration. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Data integration is always the relationship between one thing and another. So if I am doing an observation of Janelle, and I'm not taking the academic part of it, I'm only doing the behavior part of it. There is no integration. I want to look at the relationship between on-task and student performance. I want to look at the relationship between attendance and grades or student performance. If we had a lot of time, I'd show you a bunch of these because they're really cool. My wife also does this kind of work, and she was in Boston 2 days ago working with a couple of high schools, and they have some awful attendance issues. So they sent the data, and over the weekend, she and I put the data into an analysis Excel file to ask the question, what is the relationship between attendance and students' grades? So in science class in this high school, 16% of all of the skipped classes, for which there was 10,166 just by low-income kids. 75% of the absences were by low-income kids. That was 58% of the population. It was a disproportional. They should only have 58% of the absences. Low-income kids were skipping more than one would expect, and that was supposedly making things bad. So 16% of 10,000 absences, which is what? 1,600 were in science. 94% of the kids, low-income kids, passed science. There was no relationship between attendance and grades. Now, I would say there might be a relationship between attendance and performance on the high-stakes assessment, but we don't have those data yet. Teachers were giving kids passing grades whether they came to school or not. So what's the problem? The grades fixed or the attendance? What has to be fixed first? We have to fix the grades. Because if kids are evaluated completely independently of their attendance, then why does somebody want to increase attendance for which we demonstrated it doesn't matter whether they come to school or not? They're still passing just fine. So it's always the relationship between data that's important. And this we've already talked about. Instruction outside of the core has to be integrated into core, and core has to be integrated into the outside. We've already talked some about that. Universal design, I've already gone through the principles with you. You can look at that if you want to take it more of it. I've already done this with you. It was, how would you use the principles more? I did it with the standard, so we'll skip that. Okay, so consensus. I'm going to give you a table. We've talked about a lot of things here. I want you to do this by yourself first.